They cut me from my aunt's ceremony for being too loud. At 2:14 p.m., I set my phone to vibrate. At 2:15, projector would start and none of them knew whose voice was about to fill the room. The lobby of the Community Arts Center smelled like lemon cleaner and raincoats. A folding table held a neat stack of programs. A celebration of life for Lila Hart. I scanned the order of speakers. Pastor Reed, my cousin Cass, a board member from the museum. My name Jordan Hart wasn't there. Cass floated over wearing a black dress with a smile that had edges. Jordan, she said sweetly. We kept the remarks tight. You know how you get, how I get? I asked. Big, she whispered. Loud Aunt Lila deserves. Calm Aunt Lila taught me volume. She taught me to clap first, to ask the hard questions, to say no like a complete sentence. She also taught me to write everything down. I lifted my tote onto the table. Inside, a small black USB drive, a sealed envelope from Brennan & Cole, attorneys, and a printed AV order with my aunt's signature at the bottom. Playback at 2:15 p.m. was circled in blue dot. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. The theater doors opened to soft light and a big screen. In the shadowed booth, the AV technology looked up. We knew each other from the Summer Jazz series. You're Jordan, right? He said. Got a note on the work order. If anyone tries to cut her. Play file, Leela_final.mp4 at 2:15 sharp. Prepaid, rush tested. Your aunt was organized. My throat went tight. She always was. I handed him the USB. He compared it to the file list, nodded, and slid it into the rack. The screen blinked, then settled back to the slideshow of sepia photos and lilies. Reggie lowered his voice. You sure you want the mic? I can just let the file roll. I'll take the mic when it's time, I said. If they let me. Back in the aisle, people found their seats. My mother sat on the edge of the third row, hands wrapped around a program like it might break. She hadn't chosen a side yet. The board member fussed with a stack of donor cards. Cass adjusted the floral arrangement so the biggest bouquets faced the camera. Pastor Reed cleared his throat into the podium mic. Friends, we gather to honor Jordan, Cass hissed from the wing, bright teeth showing. Do not touch that microphone today. Aunt Lila wanted peace. Aunt Lila wanted truth. 2 weeks before she died, she made me tea, signed papers with a firm hand, and said, if they try to make me small, make me big. I slipped a hand into my coat pocket and felt the envelope's raised seal. To be opened by Jordan Hart during my ceremony was inked across the flap in my aunt's handwriting. The clock on the back wall ticked toward to 14. The slideshow faded to a still photo Aunt Lila in her red coat, laughing into the wind. The room settled. Cass glided to the podium. Welcome, she purred. Today we celebrate Leela without distractions. My phone buzzed once. 2:14. Reggie's booth light turned from amber to green. The projector fan spun up with a soft certain hum. Cass took a breath for her first line, and the screen behind her went black. The screen stayed black for one long beat. Then Aunt Lila filled it sharp blazer, red lipstick, eyes that always knew more than she said. If this is playing, she said voice. Even someone tried to shrink me. Gasps rippled. Cass froze at the podium with a smile that couldn't follow her face. I made 3 requests, Aunt Lila went on. 1. Jordan speaks. 2. Reggie in the booth does not cut this file. 3. Pastor Reed keeps the microphone fair one mouth at a time. Cass reached for the podium buttons. Nothing changed. Reggie's soft voice slipped through the floor speakers. Video is locked, he said. Timer runs to 2:22. Per contract. Aunt Lila looked straight down the lens. People called Jordan too loud. Loud saved my career. Loud kept the gallery open when they wanted to turn it into condos. Loud told a collector no when he tried to pay me in exposure. She smiled. Loud helped me leave instructions. My hand found the sealed envelope in my pocket. The wax seal pressed into my thumb. On screen, Aunt Lila lifted a matching envelope. Brennan & Cole flashed in the corner. Jordan, You have the twin to this, she said. Open it at the podium when the clock says 2:18. Read it all. If you are interrupted, Reggie will raise the volume. She cut a look off camera that made me laugh under my breath. Yes, really. Cass tried to take a step forward. Pastor Reed touched her elbow, gentle but firm. Let the message play, he murmured. The video continued. Bored, hello, Aunt Leela said, far too sweet to be sweet. You will find a letter in your inbox at 2:20 from my attorney. It outlines the Hart Fellowship, an $80,000 fund for young artists who can't afford rent and paint at the same time. The fellowship goes to the museum only if the ceremony follows these rules. Jordan speaks. No one edits my words. The endowment's audit happens by March 1st. Fail, and the fellowship moves to the community college. Terms are in the letter. A rustle moved through the donor row like wind through paper. And Cass, Aunt Leela added, softer now. You have a good face for rooms with cameras. You also like the center. Share it today. Be kind, or be quiet. I didn't look at Cass. I watched the timer in the corner of the screen tick to 2:17. Aunt Leela leaned closer. Jordan, say the things I was saving for after the cake. The video cut to a short montage. Leela in her red coat, Leela hanging a canvas, Leela throwing her head back as snow hit her tongue. The sound was her laugh. It filled the hall. 2:18. I stepped into the aisle. Cass blocked me with her body. Not today, she hissed. Today, Pastor Reed said, moving between us with a hand like a doorstop. He lifted the podium mic and offered it to me. His face said he had made a choice. I broke the seal. The paper inside was thick and heavy with ink that didn't smudge. I read the heading, Instructions and Announcements for the Ceremony of Leela Hart. My voice did not shake. Item 1. I read, I appoint Jordan Hart as steward of my archives, journals, sketches, digital files. No one may publish my words without Jordan's written approval. A murmur. The board member sat straighter. Item 2. I read, I authorize the release of my recorded statement to local press if this ceremony is altered or if Jordan is silenced. Reggie, you have the drive. You know what to do. Up in the booth, Reggie lifted a hand like a quiet salute. Item 3, I read, the Hart Fellowship disperses into tranche. The second $40,000 requires a completed donor audit of last year's gala. Cass moved again. Reggie nudged the master fader. The room leaned toward my voice. I looked at the last paragraph. My aunt's handwriting ran across the bottom like a signature turned into a sentence. Final note, I read, if anyone asks why Jordan is so loud, tell them it's because she learned from me. Now let her speak. I lowered the page. The clock hit 2:20. Phones buzzed along the donor row. The board member looked down, blanched, and pulled off her glasses to clean lenses that were already clean. I set the letter on the podium and took one breath. Hi, I said to the full quiet room. My name is Jordan. I was cut from the program. I tapped the envelope once with my finger. I'm back in it now. Hi, I'm Jordan. I was cut from the program, I said, and the room didn't breathe. Loud Cass muttered. Not at the mic. Aunt Leela called it volume. I answered, still steady. She used it to keep a roof over wet paintings and kids with nowhere to go after school. On the screen, the timer in the corner reached 2:22, and the video faded to her laughing in the red coat, then to black. The house lights held. The mic stayed with me. Reggie's booth lights stayed green. I'll be brief and exact, I said, tapping the letter. Aunt Leela's words, not mine. I read, Item 4. I have prepaid 1 year's lease on Suite B. The storefront, across from the bus stop on Cedar. It opens today as Hart Studio, a free drop-in workspace for teens. Keys are with Jordan. Hours 3 to 7 p.m., weekdays. The first month's supply shipment arrives at 3:30. Do not sign for it if you plan to cancel this. A soft sound rolled through the seat. Surprise undoing itself. I turned the page and continued. Item 5. I authorize release of my sketchbooks to the studio on rotation. If any board member attempts to lock them in storage, the endowment moves. Ask Brennan and Cole about Clause 7. Phones lit in the donor row again. A board member Denby, always crisp-half, rose. This isn't the time for operations, she said. Ma'am, Pastor Reed said. Mike lowered, but firm. The deceased chose the time. I folded the letter so it sat like a small square promise on the podium. A story, I said. 3 summers ago, a developer offered Aunt Leela a check with a lot of zeros. He wanted the gallery for a wine bar. She wrote nitrogen monoxide on the back of the check and framed it. It hung by the door until last week. Today, it moves to the studio. Kids need to see, no written big. Cass shifted. You're making this a spectacle. No, I said. I'm following instructions. I reached into my tote and took out a flat felt pouch I hadn't shown yet. Inside, a small brass key lay on a card with my aunt's handwriting. Studio. I held it up. Metal caught light. The room leaned toward it without meaning to. A ping carried across the hall, the sound of a bulk email finishing its run. Denby's tablet blinked. She read, swallowed, and sat back down. We ordered receive an attorney letter, she said, voice smaller. Ordered by March 1st, understood. Reggie dimmed the slideshow, leaving only my aunt's name glowing on the screen. Lila Hart. Leela also asked for one thing that is loud, I said. 10 seconds of noise for every time she was told to be quiet. Clap, stomp, cry. Do whatever grief needs. On 10, we stop and we listen to each other. I set the key on the podium. Lifted my hand and counted down with my fingers. 10, 9, 8. Someone near the back started clapping a lone 7, 6. Another joined. Then rose, then all of it. Hands, feet, low shouts that weren't words. It rose like weather, filled the rafters, shook dust down in a soft glitter. For the first time all afternoon, my mother smiled and clapped until her face went red. 1. Silence fell like a blanket. People exhaled. The sound they'd been holding left the room without breaking anything. I lifted the last page of the letter. 2 lines. My aunt's handwriting at the bottom again, firm. Item 6. Jordan, open the studio when this ends. I asked the kids to come. They'll be waiting by the lobby doors at 2:30. Give them the key. It was 2 to 9, as if they'd rehearsed it with a clock. The double doors at the back of the hall swung inward. A line of teenagers stood there, in wet hoodies and backpacks splattered with paint. The smallest girl held a cardboard sign, hand-lettered in marker Heart Studio. They looked at me, not the board, not the donors, not the flowers. Hi, the girl said into the giant room. Voice too small for the sound system and somehow perfect. Are we allowed in? The girl with the cardboard sign waited in the doorway, rain speckling her hoodie. Behind her, 5 kids, then 10, then more backpacks, paint on shoelaces. The kind of quiet you learn when adults make rooms too neat. You're allowed, I said into the mic. Aunt Lila said so. I held up the brass key. Jordan, Cass, snapped. Voice sugar on the edges. The program is not. Pastor Reed stepped to the podium again, palm open. The deceased gave explicit instructions, he said, gentler than a gavel. Let them in. The teens filed down the aisle, eyes wide, feet soft on carpet. The smallest girl stopped at the front row and looked at me. Then at the key. Then at the screen where Leela Hart still glowed. Can I hold it? She asked. You should open the door, I said. I pressed the key into her palm. Metal against small fingers. It looked too big and exactly right. A board member rose half an inch. Insurance covered, I said, tapping the letter. Clause 7. Brennan and Cole CCD, your carrier at 2:20. Phones chimed in the donor row again. Denby scanned her tablet, cheeks pink. They did, she said, voice small. General liability rider received a sound from the booth, a soft click. Reggie had switched the projection to a live feed from the front doors, grainy and steady. We watched ourselves on screen as we turned as one toward the lobby teens first, then me, then the pastor, then the whole strange congregation pulling on coats. The lobby doors blew open. Rain pinpricked our faces. Across the street, the storefront with papered windows waited under a crooked awning painted Sweet Bee. A neon open sign glowed dark in the window. Unplugged but ready. We crossed with the light. Drivers slowed. Someone in a delivery van rolled down a window and shouted, "Heart forever." Like a blessing, up close, I saw it. A small envelope taped under the mailbox. My name on it, in thick blue ink. I tore it free. Inside, a business license copy, a laminated occupancy card, and a sticky note in my aunt's hand, "Flip breaker, at 3 o'clock. Let them count down." A tiny heart drew itself into the corner like she couldn't help it. Insurance, Denby murmured again, because old habits tug. Fire code, a man stepped from under the awning, shaking rain from a cap. Mr. Alvarez, the landlord. He'd sat quietly in the back of the hallball cap, low eyes damp. He held up a second keyring with a small silver tag, "Sweet Bee Master, Lila prepaid, 12 months. He said to me, not to the board. Left me a note to give you this when the kids show up. Guess I'm on schedule. He put the ring in my hand like he was passing a relay baton. The smallest girl found the lock with her key and stood on tiptoe. The metal turned stiff, then gave. The deadbolt slid back with a sound that felt like a door learning its job. Wait, Cass hissed. We haven't vetted volunteers. There's no ribbon. There's a breaker, I said. We stepped into the dim. The paper on the windows made the room a soft cave. Tables waited under dust sheets. A stack of easels leaned like folded legs. On the far wall, the framed no-check hung, stubborn and beautiful. Beside it, a light switch plate had a handwritten label taped above it. Volume, it was 259. Ready. I asked the room dot. The kids nodded like a chorus. 10. The smallest girl counted. Small but firm. 9, 8. The sound pulled people in museum board, neighbors, kids who had wandered up with scooters. We all counted, rain ticking the awning like a metronome. 3, 2, 1. I flipped the volume switch. The breaker thumped. Light chased itself across the room, string lights along the ceiling, lamps on every table. A tiny stereo in the corner clicked, and Aunt Leela's laugh poured out first. Then a piano track from last winter's student show. It made the paper on the windows glow from inside like a lantern. A delivery truck rumbled up. Right on script, with Supplies 330 stenciled on the side. The driver leaned out, bewildered and grinning. "Heart Studio," he called. "I got a shipment that hates stairs. Bring it," I said. Through here, behind the counter, an envelope lay under a rock paperweight. For Jordan. Open last. 3:01. I checked the clock. 3:01 blinked on my phone. Cass hovered in the doorway. Rain jeweled in her lashes, indecision finally catching her. The board stood behind her, phones cooling in their palms. Faces arranged for a different kind of picture. I lifted the envelope, and before I tore the flap, I caught the smallest girl's eye. "Want to do it with me?" I asked. She nodded, stepped forward, and put her hand on the paper with mine. Outside, the truck door slammed. Inside the room breathed. I slid my thumb under the seal. We tore the envelope open together. Inside was a short letter in Aunt Lila's blocky hand, a slim metal card, and a folded sheet with 4 names. "Jordan," I read, "if the lights are on." Then the door was opened by the right hands. "Good, here is the heart. Studio card linked to an account, seated at $20,000 for the first month. Buy paper, paint, pizza. Post receipts on the corkboard. Make it boring on paper and wild on the walls." I turned the metal card over. Heart Studio. No one breathed. The folded sheet rattled in my fingers. First team committee, I read. Chosen because they showed up when no one told them they had to. 4 names. The smallest girl's was on top. You each get a key and a vote on hours, rules, and music. Be good stewards. Be loud if you need to be. The smallest girl put a hand over her mouth and then laughed into it, like she'd learned to hide joy. I pressed the key back into her palm. "You're on the committee," I said. She nodded hard. There was a postscript. "Cassure, good with a camera. Use it. Build free portfolios. No selfies unless they ask. Denby audit every penny." I copied your mother. She taught you better. Reggie put the student tracks on a loop and hide the spare USB where only Jordan can find it. Pass to keep the mic fair. Behind me, footsteps shifted. Cass moved through the doorway like it had edges. I can do portfolios, she said, voice smaller than her dress. If that helps, it helps, I said. If you show up. Denby cleared her throat, tablet in hand, rain in her hair. Our board accepts the terms, she said. The audit begins tomorrow. March 1st stands. She exhaled. We'll also help with insurance riders and volunteer background checks. Quietly, she added. And for once, it didn't sound like a threat. Mr. Alvarez set the spare keys on the counter and signed a one-line receipt I wrote on the spot. Master keys transferred sweet, be boring on paper. Wild on the walls, the delivery driver wheeled in boxes like Christmas arrived, wet. We slit them with a plastic knife. Canvases, brushes, bulk packs of pencils, tubs of tempera, rolls of tape. On top of one box sat a wrapped brick. I peeled it back. Flyers, printed and folded. Heart Studio 3 to 7 p.m. Free. Bring curiosity. On the back, Aunt Leela had scrawled, tape these to the bus stops. Ask forgiveness later. Stations, I said, clapping once. Tables here for drawing. Easels by the windows. Paint stays on that tarp unless a painting begs you to break a rule. Kids moved like they'd been waiting all day to be told where to put their want. The smallest girl taped the cardboard sign to the window, marker side out. Another kid spun the no check so it faced the door. Someone found a box of thrift aprons and passed them like team jerseys. Reggie leaned in from the doorway, gave a two-finger salute, and set a tiny speaker on the counter. A piano riff unfurled, soft as rain. He tucked a spare USB under a taped flap labeled Not Here and winked. I placed the fellowship letter on a clipboard by the register and flipped the corkboard sign to open. People from the ceremony filtered across the street. Neighbors, donors with phones forgotten in pockets, my mother with her hands out like she didn't know whether to help or hug. She did both. Do we paint now? A boy asked, brush hovering. We do, I said. But first, sign the wall, small, your name matters. They lined up to write on the strip of primed drywall we'd left clean. Names bloomed in Sharpie. The smallest girl wrote slow and careful, then added a tiny star over her I. Cass lifted her camera and did not pose anyone. She waited, then clicked when a kid stopped thinking about being watched. Denby rolled up her sleeves and counted brushes back into jars when they tried to scatter. Pastor Reed moved stools like a stagehand, humming. I slid the metal card into a drawer and dropped the keyring onto a hook by the door. The hook held Dot outside, rain thinned to mist. The streetlights blinked on. Catching in the string lights like they'd practiced together, Mr. Alvarez propped the door with a rubber wedge. Air's good for paint, he said, so I hear. Aunt Leela's laugh edged back into the room on the track Reggie set. Then a beat. Then the old student chorus threw in a messy harmony that made three kids grin without looking up. I looked across the street at the Arts Center. Through its glass, the lilies still stood. The program we didn't follow lay face down on a chair. They cut me from my aunt's ceremony for being too loud. They didn't know she left me the switch. We flipped it. The lights held. The door stayed open. And our room filled itself with the kind of noise you make when you're finally allowed to take up space. I put a fresh roll of tape on the counter, set the no check straight, and wrote the day's date in the corner of the corkboard. Open. Then I handed the smallest girl the scissors for the next box. Your turn, I said.